One of the things I'm paid to do is to pronounce blessings. In my years as a pastor, I've pronounced all kinds of blessings. I blessed babies, I blessed houses, pets, relationships, and the dearly departed. I have a tradition each Ash Wednesday in which I stand on a sidewalk of downtown Waco, dressed in a black suit and clergy collar with a sign next to me that simply says, "Ashes to go." Anyone can pause to receive ashes on their forehead and receive a brief blessing, which usually goes something like this. Remember that you are dust, and to dust you shall return. But until that time, know that God loves you very much, and you make God happy. Some might say that I'm trivializing an ancient tradition by foregoing a worship service and instead offering a sort of express drive-through ashes. But there's nothing trivial about looking into the eyes of a stranger and telling them they are loved by God. In fact, it's one of the most sacred experiences of the year for me. But it's a mistake to think that ordained ministers are the only people qualified to pronounce blessings. If you don't believe me, just go ahead and sneeze in line at the post office, and you'll more than likely receive one or several blessings from folks nearby. Or if you sit down to eat at a restaurant and you might see people pausing briefly before digging into their meal with bowed heads and closed eyes, asking for God's blessing on the food that's been set before them and the hands that have prepared it. Almost everything we encounter can and maybe should be blessed. All you need to do is stop long enough and look at it and take in its story. I've placed some rocks on your tables that maybe could use your blessing. For those who aren't sitting at tables, I have a basket right back there with the bookshelf, and you can grab a rock from there. But before blessing it, you have to gather its story. Is it light or dark colored? Is it smooth or rough? Feel the weight of it in your hands and consider its size. It may have endured thousands of years of wear and tear from water and wind and heat and cold. Maybe it was once a mighty mountain. Maybe it has sat at the bottom of a stream as a feeding table for fish. It has probably welcomed more sunrises than you imagine. Once upon a time in its youth, this rock was part of the Earth's liquid molten core until it was pushed up and cooled, ready to begin its long existence as a rock, eventually wearing away with small particles of itself becoming sand and soil, supplying its minerals to feed the plants that take root in it. After considering all this, maybe you would like to say a blessing. It doesn't have to be fancy. Bless you, rock, for being you. Blessed are you, O rock, for giving yourself to feed plants, which in turn feeds animals and humans. Blessed are you, O God, for using this rock to stop me in my tracks. I believe the whole world could use all the blessings it can get. In the book of Genesis, there's a heartbreaking story about two twin brothers, one named Jacob and the other Esau. Esau was the one who was lawfully entitled to receive his father's blessing. But Jacob disguised himself as Esau, and the father mistakenly blessed Jacob instead of Esau because he wasn't able to see clearly. And the story concludes with Esau's lament. Do you really have only one blessing, Father? Bless me too, my father. And Esau wept loudly. This morning's text describes Jesus with a whole bag of blessings, more than enough to go around for everyone. In the verses just prior to it, we read that he had spent his days healing spirits with his proclamation of the good news of the kingdom and healing bodies by curing people of their diseases and pain. And it concludes by saying great crowds followed him from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and from beyond the Jordan. And it's these great crowds to whom he would deliver what has become known as the Sermon on the Mount, a sermon that would open up with this morning's blessings. I think we can draw a lot from the blessings, but I also think it's important not to overlook the first 5 words of the text that introduced those blessings. When Jesus saw the crowds. You see, Jesus knew that it does no good to go around tossing out blessings left and right unless you stop and really consider that which is to receive the blessing. Just as we need to pause for a moment and reflect on everything the rock has experienced in its past, as well as everything it will experience in the future, just as we consider how its existence and our own are interconnected, just as we do all this before offering a blessing, Jesus did the same thing. He looked out and he really saw the people who made up the crowds. And oh my goodness, what he must have seen when he looked into their eyes. He saw mothers grieving the loss of their babies, an all too common occurrence in that day, but no less painful than it is today. He saw people who had never known true freedom and who longed for a taste of justice. He saw people who had risen above the ugliness in life with their acts of mercy and their gentle nature. He saw people who believed in peace and people who were persecuted for those beliefs. And he didn't turn away. He bore witness to their hopes for a better future and their pain and their goodness. And as he looked into the depths of their souls, he could not help but cry out a blessing upon them all. Blessed are you who are poor in spirit, you who mourn, and you who are gentle. Blessed are you who hunger and thirst for justice, you who work for peace, and you who are persecuted. And on it went until he had blessed himself out. Now, some would say that it really didn't do much good. The grieving person still grieved, and the person working for peace still dreamed of a better day. Those who were persecuted continued to live under oppression, but maybe they weren't looking to be fixed. Maybe they only wanted to be seen. Maybe they only needed someone to bear witness to their struggles, their goodness, and their pain. And maybe that's all any of us really want in this world, to be seen. For someone to look into our eyes and witness our goodness and to call us blessed. Like those strangers each Ash Wednesday whom I declare to be good in the eyes of God and whom I bless with the assurance of God's love. Maybe that's all any of us are looking for. I think there's a shortage of blessings in this world. A lack of people willing to look into the eyes of another, assuring them of their worthiness. Most of us aren't willing to slow down long enough for it to happen. but some folks seem to think they aren't qualified for the job. Barbara Brown Taylor is an American Episcopal priest, professor, author, and theologian. The closing chapter of her book, An Altar in the World, is entitled The Practice of Pronouncing Blessings. And in it she writes, I am not sure that you have to believe in God to pronounce a blessing. It may be enough to see the thing for what it is and pronounce it good. For most of us, that is as close to God as we will ever get anyway. I agree. Even beyond the goodness that takes place when a person receives a blessing, there is the goodness that happens to the person offering the blessing. In that brief moment, we see the person or the flower or the rock from the same perspective as God does, and as Jesus did in this morning's text. We see them with eyes of compassion. Taylor writes, to pronounce a blessing is to participate in God's own initiative. To pronounce a blessing is to share God's own audacity. Through tears and choked sobs, Esau wailed, do you really only have one blessing, Father? Bless me too, my Father. In truth, there is more than one blessing to be shared. Let's participate in the audacity of our Heavenly Parent by paying attention to what's happening around us, recognizing the goodness in it, and offering up a blessing on its behalf. There are plenty enough insults, threats, and curses in this world to last a lifetime. What it could use more of is blessings. Let's get into the blessing business. Amen.